Alright, hey everybody, hope you all had a great day so far. I'm feeling better now. Earlier I had a pretty bad headache and my sinuses were kind of crazy. I think it's just because there was a rain front that came through today. But besides that, I had a pretty nice morning. But let's go ahead and get to programming. So we're going to work some more on the Twitch interactive card game. Which basically, again, just for new viewers, is kind of like an old card game called Memory or Concentration, where there's a grid of cards placed face down, and each card has a pair that is the same picture, and then everybody goes around and tries to guess two cards, and if they are, and then you take turns and reveal those two cards that were guessed, and if it's a pair, then you get points. If not, they are placed back in the same spot, face down again. And so you kind of have to try to remember where different cards have been revealed so you can find the paired cards. Except this game is going to be done over Twitch, so Twitch viewers will be able to make guesses in chat, and the pictures on the cards will be different Twitch viewers' logos. And then you'll be able to spend points to buy different effects for your cards and change some of the rules of the game. So I think it should be pretty fun. So right now I was in the middle of... Oh yeah, so I'm trying to download a follower list. And I made a few changes right before the stream started because I realized a couple things. First off, I don't really need to put the username and the display name into the persistent user database because we don't really need to save that in between sessions. So instead, when we update the username, it should actually be stored into the active user database, which is just information about current viewers. And then, so that's what these errors are about because I switched around some variables. And then I also saw that the active user database should be stored by the game's user ID, which is separate than the Twitch user ID. And I have to do that because you can't store strings onto an entity, so. But we'll just be able to map the game user ID and onto the Twitch user ID pretty easily. Anyway, I guess I should update this. So where we update the username, I'll just add another entry here that is to get or create the active entry for a user ID. So it would be an integer here. Maybe I want to have two hash maps here. One that would be by the game ID, and then another one that would be by the Twitch user ID. In which case, I probably want to be able to store them both here. Oh, yeah, so this should now be the active user database. Okay, and then I guess I want to have another version of this that would use the string Twitch ID. Okay, so I'll need to have another dictionary. Yeah, I think I need to do this, but that means that I shouldn't ever create. Well, no, I guess this is fine. It's just whenever we set the Twitch ID, when we set by Twitch ID, we'll also just generate a user ID for it. I'm trying to think if there's any time that we know the user ID but not a Twitch ID, because when we create one, we kind of just want to be able to have both at the same time. So you know what? I think I might... Let's wait to update this until we get a little bit more use case out of it. And for these functions, I'll just throw not implemented exception. And yeah, I'll have to come back to this. Because yeah, I want to first... I wonder, when is this called? I think it's called from the chat. Which I think I might change the way it works, because I want to move this chatbot into a system instead of it being on a mono behavior. So what this does is that when we receive a message, it updates the username. So that way we can get a list of active chatters. So yeah, here definitely we'd want to be able to index it by the Twitch user ID. But I think that whenever we create a new user, well, I guess not necessarily, but yeah, so if we create a new user based on the user ID, we'd want to go ahead and assign it a numeric, like a game user ID. So I think, yeah, so if we only know the Twitch user ID, we can just give it a game ID, but if we only know the game ID, I don't think there'd ever be a time where that would be the case, because we'd only want to create a user if we had got some information about it from Twitch. But anyway, we'll come back to that. Alright, so here, this is what I wanted to work on. So this is asking for a list of followers, and this user ID is my channel. So we're going to get all followers of my channel. Oh yeah, I don't need to create that. And then the Twitch API, or the Twitch lib, which is the Unity implementation of a helper, I guess, library that calls the Twitch API, will ask Twitch for all of my channel's followers, and then it will give me back a list. And this function should be pretty useful, because I was looking at the Twitch API last stream, and normally you'd have to make multiple calls to get like the number of followers, and then you'd have to get the followers in chunks. So I guess this will take care of all that, which is nice. And then it gives us a list here. Okay, so then I stored this information in another object, because we can't put this into an entity because it's just too big and complicated. But then we do create an event to let the rest of the game know that we have got the response back. So I don't think I've done anything to either request or listen to responses yet. But I know that when this wait user response transitioner. Okay, so this is when we've already downloaded it. So this wait stream active. Okay, actually what I want to do is this request setup is what will... Okay, so yeah, we do make the request for the follower list already, but nothing deals with the response yet. So I guess what I'd want to do is have a system. Okay, I think I'll put it in just the normal game system because we've already gotten the data from Twitch, and that's what this information is about, or these classes deal with, and then the normal game classes will deal with translating that into data that the game would know about. And since we're dealing with things that can't be put into entities, that we can't do it in a job, unfortunately. Alright, so this will be follower, response, handler, I guess. Okay. Well, it didn't type out. Follower list, request. Okay, sounds a bit funny, but I think this is most descriptive of what this class will do. Okay, so first of all, we're going to need to get the list of the follow that class that we store the list of followers in. What was that called? Okay, this one. So response lists. And then we'll require singleton, or no, we don't know if it's a singleton, so we actually do have to do it as an entity query. We'll get entity query, and we really just need it to be type read only follower list response. Okay, and I guess this should actually be like received, because if I can spell it, because this doesn't actually contain any of the data, it just is like a notification. Gosh, keyboard's gotten like shifted or something, so my fingers can't find the keys. Okay, so yeah, we're just gonna make sure that there's at least one entity of this type. Okay, and it's going to be tagged as a message, so it will automatically get destroyed at the end of the list, at the end of the frame, so I don't have to deal with that. Okay, and so to get the list, we just gotta call the GameLogic database. Alright, so onUpdate will only be called when there's at least one event of this type. So what we need to do is find the most recent response list. Private. Get most recent list. So we just need to search through and then we gotta get the most recent time. So we gotta go for let's see. Yeah, we can do for each. Okay, so if this response timestamp is after the most recent time, then we'd want to set most recent to to the response. Okay, and then we'll just return it. If it's null, then that means that there's nothing in here, which should be an error, actually. Okay, that's saying it could have not been initialized, so I'll just set this to null. So we want to get the most recent list, and I'm just gonna assert here that response is not null. So what this will do is it will throw an error if this is ever false. Which I probably throw an error anyway, because it would say null reference exception, but this will be just a little bit more intuitive, I think. And what? Okay, so now that we have that, I need to basically search through all the users here and insert their data into the whichever database it would go into. So pretty much what I would do here is let's close some files. So the user database really only contains a score right now. What's this? Oh, these are... Yes, this would be by Twitch ID. So probably what I want to do is, at this point, I won't need to ever modify this persistent database, I don't think. The active user database will need to be updated with all of this information that we download, because we want to have the most recent information in here, so anything that's older we can just get rid of. String logo URL. Okay, so yeah, this we won't know the texture yet. I think I'm just going to remove this because I don't really like to have fields that I don't actually use yet. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so when we look through every user, if it's not active in here, then we need to generate a game ID and then generate this object and insert it into both of the dictionaries. Then if it does already exist, which we would be able to find out by searching by the Twitch ID, then we just need to update these fields. Okay, so let's see, for each user and response dot follow list. So, okay, so this is actually tells information about the follow itself. We really just want the user because we don't care when the user followed, I don't think. Each follow. Okay, so let's make another function. Private void. I guess this is called update user. What is the type for this? It is an I user. Okay. Okay, so update user follow dot user, and okay, so from there I think we can get the Twitch ID. Oh yeah, so the ID and then the logo, URL, the name, and I think that's really, yeah, I guess we actually care about the display name. Okay, yeah, so we have all the information that we need right there. Alright, so Twitch ID equals user.id, and then F, so we gotta get the active user database. Alright, so if again, we want to check if we have something for this Twitch user, then we just update it. If we don't, then we need to create something new. So let's get actually I don't need to do that. So if database by Twitch ID, try get value. So we want to pass it the Twitch ID and then out user entry. And what this does, it returns true if this dictionary contains something for the Twitch ID, and it returns false if it doesn't. And if it does contain a value, then it would insert it into this variable. So what we want to do is, if this is false, then we need to do some special logic here. So first, we need to create a new value. We can go ahead and set the Twitch ID, and the game ID would be database.next game user ID, and then I need to make sure to increment that. And then I need to insert this entry into both of the lookup tables. Okay. So I feel like I'm gonna need to separate this into some other function, because I think I'll be using this in a bunch of different classes. But for now, I'll just leave it here. That's probably something to go in that helper class, actually, but... what was it called? Oh yeah, this user database manager. Well, let's not get too far ahead of myself, I guess. Alright, so anyway, now we have the user entry and we can update the values. So we just need to update the display name and the logo URL. Okay, so that's not too difficult. I guess I'll go ahead and print out something here. Okay, so database entry for user updated. I guess, I don't know, I think that's probably good. In fact, we could even just move this whole update user into its own class, because I think pretty much anytime we get this iUser, which is that also what we get from chat? From chatting, I mean? Where's the chatbot? Oh no, so it is something different. From here we don't get the logo, I don't think. But still, I think we will also use this when we get like subscriber lists and things like that. Maybe. Let's see. I think this is still useful, so I think I'll leave that function. Okay, let's private, or I guess this will be public void update or create active entry. And we'll just pass pretty much this entire function. Why don't we go ahead and return the user as well in case any other function needs to make any other changes to it. Okay, so now this follow request handler can pretty much just call that. But first it needs to get a reference to the user database manager. Which I think I just made another system. So I can just call world get or create user database manager. Okay, and then here, like, probably we'd want to tag this user as a follower. Maybe I'll do that now. So, for instance, we'll have like a bunch of different flags. So, user flags. Sometimes I was gonna say sometimes it's useful instead of using these flags if you just put user, if you just had maintained a list of users that were followers. I don't really know what would be better in this case, because I think either way we'll probably just be looping through this whole list whenever we need to do work on it. Oh, but we will want to be able to filter this in a job. I guess we can put an enumeration on a job because it's just an integer. So yeah, what I'm trying to say is that we want to be able... Oh, I can't do that. I was going to say we want to be able to have like a list of user flags so that we could pass it to a job and then filter through all the users for ones that meet a certain criteria, but the problem is they'll be shifting around based on their integer or their ID, so it's not really easy to do that. And the list would get really long probably. Alright, so I was actually gonna like put this on an entity so we can just use Unity's entity system. Which is probably fine. So maybe even this database manager here would want to create the entity for this user as well. That's a good question. Probably a better way to do it is if we're going to mess with entities, is if we have create an event that says change the user flags, and then some other system would go through and edit the entities, because otherwise this handler would have to search through the list of entities to find one of a specific ID. And I don't really want to have to do that because this isn't on a thread, so everything I do here is having to go on the main thread, which could get kind of slow. But unfortunately we can't do this part in a job because it doesn't deal with only blittable types. It has the strings that we have to deal with. So I wonder, do I even need to have the user flags here, or... I mean, do I even need to store the user flags on this active user database? I'm not sure. But anyway, we probably want to have a follower. Okay, so if you've never worked with flags before, You need to kind of have an understanding of binary numbers, and basically every number you can store as like a an ordered list of bits, which take either a 0 or 1, and but you can also use those as like a list of Boolean values. So, for instance, if the first bit in a number is 1, then that means it's true. So I'm assigning the bit at position 1 to be followers. So if it's 1 there, then that would mean that this user would be a follower. And then we'll have a bunch of other flags as time goes on. But this, this is a shift operator, so it basically just means move or change this number 1 by shifting all the shifting all the bits 1 position, or I guess it'd be in positions to the left, which basically multiplies it by 2 in binary. So basically, if we shift it 0 positions to the left, it's just going to stay 1, which also signifies the first bit in the number. But anyway, I hope that was kind of made sense. It's a crash course on binary numbers and bit flags. Alright, so we can go ahead and update this. So what it's trying to do is update the display name for a user seen in chat. So first it would want to, so here we would only know the Twitch ID, but it's kind of just like this actually. So can I extract this method? So get or create active entry. Yeah, that's fine. And then database. Oops. And I think I'll move this before here just to kind of keep things sorted. And what's it not like about that? Big reference. Oh yeah, so yeah, I marked that as static, but I don't want it to be static. Okay, so if we have the Twitch ID, so all this is doing is creating a new user again if it doesn't exist, and then updating all this information. Right. So I think I can delete those functions now. So what this does is, yeah, it gets our creates an active entry, and then it just updates the display name. Oh, get or create. I guess we don't really use the username because basically it's just the lowercase version of the display name. So I don't know if there's any time that we'll need to use it. So I think I'll just not track it. And does anything use this? Oh, something in some debug. This is simple to implement, so. So this could be bad if it's null. Isn't there that null coalescing operator? I think what this does is if it's null, do I put the there? Yeah, so what this means is that if this returns null, which would never happen, right, actually? Yeah, because it just creates something new if it doesn't exist. But display name could be null. But what this operator does, I guess I'll explain it since I tried to use it, is that if this expression is null, then it just returns null, and it doesn't go on to the next expression. But if it's not null, then it would go ahead and call .display name. We don't ever update. Alright, so it's good that we fixed up those classes. Oh, we don't even need to have that reference anymore. Or fixed up these methods. Let me see. Okay, so now what I need to do is figure out how I'm going to deal with the user entities. I know I need to use them because when we're trying to download logos, I'm going to need to be able to sort through the users. And I'd like to do it on a thread, so I need to get some information into entities. So I guess I could just have public struct user flags. Another way I could do this also is instead of just having flags, I could tag an entity as a follower. But I don't really think that's that useful because besides sorting users, knowing it's a follower it's not going to be used in the game logic. I'm pretty sure. But I guess if it does, we can tag both ways. Or keep track of it both ways. Yeah, so it's getting confused because I have two different types named user flags. I guess we'll say, call this user has flags. Okay. And so what I want to do is this response handler should tell the game to add this or update this flag value. And then if there's no entity for this user, then it should create the entity. And it'd be nice if I could do that on another thread. I guess I could just spawn the thread here on the onUpdate. But I feel like updating flags, if it's going to be that complicated, it should be in another system. Yeah. Okay, so I guess what I need to do... Sorry, I'm just trying to think through. Let's have update user flags request. And this will just be a component. Oh, forgot. These should be tagged as iComponent data. Otherwise I can't use them on entities in the first place. So what I want here is the user ID and then user flags. Okay. So I guess this will spawn a component or an entity with this component, and then some other system will look through here and update it. I could do that in this user database manager, but I think that this is going to get full enough just dealing with this database stuff. So, alright, I guess we'll have to keep track of the entity command buffer system. And I was also trying to think about how I want to deal with that, because for, what's the word? Efficiency, you want to try and batch together as much changes as possible. But the problem with that is you got to decide when the buffer will run. So if I have this run on the begin and initialization buffer system, then the requests won't get into the system until the beginning of the next frame, which I guess might be fine if I just have the user flag updater run at the beginning of the frame so that the data is ready to use on the next frame. And I kind of want that to happen because I don't want to have to wait one more frame for the user data to be updated to match the database. So I'll have to be careful that whenever I update this, I'm sure that the flags, that we like wait a frame before we try to use the flags. Otherwise we could miss some changes, but I guess it's not a huge deal if that happens. It'd just be like for one game, and then when the game runs around again, then it will use the correct entry. I guess we'll just see about it when we come to that. Oh, hi Arthur. How are you doing? Thanks for stopping by. Alright, so yeah, I just needed to talk through that. So let's go ahead and get the command buffer. So it'd be begin initialization entity command buffer. And then I want to create the buffer here. And so basically, even if we're not going to actually change the flags for this user, we want to just go ahead and create a request to change it, because it's not going to be easy to look up the flags. I guess we could make it easy by putting the flags on the database, but I don't think it really matters. Oh, also, I should probably have something here that's like add flags and then remove flags. I think the easiest way to do that is just to have two separate fields here, which I think I'm okay with. They're just integers behind the scenes, so it doesn't take up that much room. Okay, so now I need to have the archetype as well. So entity archetype, and this will just be the flag update archetype. And then archetype is just, it tells Unity what components you want to be on an entity when it's first created. And it can help speed up a lot of the work Unity has to do. So I want to have the user flag update request. I could just tack on the message component here so it'd be deleted automatically. Maybe I'll go ahead and do that. Alright, so we have the request entity equals buffer.create entity, and then we pass the archetype here. So now this entity already has the update flag request component. So I would just use set component data instead of add component data. So the user ID. Oh yeah, so we could get that this way. Oh, so the user ID actually, oh yeah, it is, it's right there, the game ID. And then, so we want to just add flags here, and we want to add follow, and then remove flags we can set to 0 because we don't want to remove anything. Okay, that's a good point, I just thought of something like, when would we actually want to remove the follower flag? Probably. So I think how it would actually work is, I don't know if we even would get a notification when somebody unfollows, and even if we did, I don't know if we actually care. But whenever we get disconnected, we would just clear all the flags, and then we would just build them back up. So actually, I don't know. Well, we do need to remove like the active chatter flag because that's on a timer. Yeah, but in general, I think we'll just be adding flags instead of removing. Wonder. I don't even know if Twitch like has a notification when somebody unfollows. So the only way we could tell is if we like re-downloaded the list and saw that somebody was missing. Which I don't know if that's something we really need to worry about. Let me see. Yeah, be on PubSub, I think. Okay, this. Yeah, the followers aren't even on the PubSub actually. I know there's a way that you can see when a follower is added, because I think the Twitch API has that functionality. Right? So API. Oh, I think it's in chat. Yeah, the chat client has like on follow. No? Are we doing, is there no... Okay, that's a little annoying if there's never a follow notification. But I guess it doesn't really matter, we'll just have to re-download the follow list every frame, or every time the game restarts. I'll need to look into that a little more. There's bits, points, subscriptions, and whispers. Okay, well, if that's the case, then we might actually be downloading the follower list every frame, and then we actually would need to remove this follower flag. Okay, but if that's the case, I guess we'll deal with it when we need to. Yeah, I was hoping that we'd be able to just like listen to events, and we get like the follower or the new follower event like you can get on your Twitch overlay. So it seems like there must be some way to do it. Now I'm curious. So Twitch lib on follow. API, okay. So get followed. Okay, that's like what they are following. By the way, I did that right. It's not what I'm following, it's my followers. That's what I want. Yeah, get all followers, okay. Making sure. Alright, well, yeah, I'm spending too much time on that, so we'll, I'll need to look that up. Write a note. So, can you get a notification on new followers? Not, that kind of messes up a little bit of the flow I had planned, but again, it's not like a huge deal. We just will download the follower list at the beginning of every right before we pick out which logos to download, because then that's the only time it actually matters that much. Anyway, so I first want to make sure that this works. I feel like I'm doing a lot without testing, so I think I should stop here and see what happens. Oh yeah, it's just that warning because I forgot to set that to null. Okay, so what should happen is... Oh, also, yeah, I need to... This response handler needs to clear the response lists. And then should send out... Oop, just a second. Sorry, like I said, my allergies are pretty bad. But yeah, so it should clear the response lists and then send out some event that it's processed them, so that the other parts of the game know that that's happened. But I think I'll just wait because it doesn't actually make any difference for point. Yeah, right now, because I just want to test to make sure that the follower list gets downloaded correctly. So we should get spammed here with like a bunch of new users created. Okay, except we get an error. Follower list received has not been added to the entity. Where was that added? Block on the store. It's not going to tell me where that command was added, but follower list receive. Oh. So here it's saying oh yeah, because I'm trying to set the component. But shouldn't it have been on the archetype? Oh, okay, I forgot to update the archetype to include this response component instead of the online event. So it looks like we downloaded the user list, but it didn't but obviously it couldn't update because that there was an error with the event. So now we got a null reference. Oh, I think I know what that is too. Yeah, this by Twitch ID. The initializer. Yeah, this active by Twitch ID equals new. Okay, so that should fix that. Hopefully it'll work now. I don't want to send spam Twitch with too many API requests because they might lock me out for a bit. Okay, so let's see. It did. We've got a bunch of different users. Okay, so yeah, that looks good. I think it worked. And then if I look in the entity debugger, oh, you know what? Those flag update requests got deleted because they were all tagged as a message. So yeah, they don't exist anymore. I was gonna look and see. But I guess it worked. Okay, so now what I should do, let's close all but this. I want to make another system that will look at this update user flags request and actually do the work. So this will be a job system for sure. So a user flag updater. And I want to actually put this in the, although it's not a transition group, I want it to run in that system group because I want every other system to have access to updated user information. Well, maybe I should just make it so that anything in the initialization system group shouldn't use user flags because it might not be up to date. Okay, so let's start with the job first. This will be an iJob for each not with entity. And we'd get the update user flags request. And I think that's it. So for every request, we'll want to look through the list of all current users. Now I'm wondering, what if we get a request for 2 users that both don't exist? If that happens, then we'd create the entity twice. So probably what I should do, this is kind of annoying. I should look at all new entities I need to create, and then if there's duplicates, then I should delete one of them. Or no, what I would actually do is merge together all the update requests. Okay, so that makes things a little bit more complicated, but I think I'll still do it. So anyway, what I want here is a list of all user IDs. And then read-only public, native, array, user has flags. So basically, this is a request based on the user flags, or the user IDs, so I want to find the index in this array that corresponds to that entity, and then combine all of the flag changes. And then if the user ID doesn't exist, I need to create a new entity for it. I'm trying to think of the best way to do that. Let's see. Struct existing flag update. Probably an easier way to do this would be one system would look through and just create the user entities, and then another system would update the flags, but I'm trying to think. Is there another Is there another type of event that would maybe want to add a user ID or a user entity? Maybe. Let's see. Public struct update user entity request. And then this will just have the user ID. And then the next, and then it would also have this component if we wanted to update the flags. So that way I could just have one system that creates entities as needed, and then other systems update the flags. Okay, so but now I need that system that updates the entities to run, to have its the command buffer run before any other updater. So I guess I can just use that phase transition. So this would be phase setup system group. Okay, and then I'll have to have another user entity creator. I really don't want to have to create another entity command buffer because that can slow down the game, but I guess I will if I need to. Right, so this will be user entity creator. So I think I'll just copy this because I was kind of in the middle of doing it. Alright, so this will go and the... oh, it's wrong namespace, so... okay, so, phase transition. So yeah, this isn't a transition, but I want it to use the phase transition entity command buffer. So this will be, so what I need to do is, again, I have to search through all of these user called update user entity request to find ones for users that don't exist yet, because if that it doesn't exist, I need to create the user. And then I need to look and make sure that there's not duplicates. If there's duplicates, then I need to like delete the duplicates so that I only create one new entity for every user ID. I started thinking about something unrelated. Okay, so actually, yeah, I don't need to get a native array to the request because we're just going to do my job for each. Okay, so this would, well, all I need to do is store an integer. So yeah, I'll have a public native list. Okay, yeah, I can't add to a list in parallel. I think I have to use a queue. Native queue int parallel writer, and then I'll have to change this queue into a list so that I can. Well, maybe not. So that I can find unique values in it. This is starting to be kind of involved. I wonder if there's a better way to do this. Maybe in the user database we just have an entity. Yeah, because if I just do it these requests, this is going to have to search through the entire list of user IDs to find the users that were requested to be changed here to see if we need to create a new user, and then again when the flag updater, it's going to have to look through the entire list to find the user IDs that correspond to the user flag. So that is kind of inefficient. And another way I could do it is maybe just store the entity here. So user entity, and then we'd have a reference to this entity, and then I could just use a command buffer to change these values on it. So how would that look like? So basically here we have update or create active entry. It would also create an entity, which means that we need to pass this a buffer. So entity command buffer. Either that, or I could just have this database manager have a buffer itself, but then it would have to create like an entirely new buffer for every change here, which I think would not be good. Actually, I've never really tested how expensive it is to create new buffers, but it doesn't seem like it'd be good. It's going to create a new array for every user we have to update. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and pass this buffer to it, which means I need to pass the buffer here. Also here. So this makes me think that maybe we should not create the entry when we call this function. So again, I'm gonna just throw an error here because we'll have to think about this. System not implemented exception. So this is what we would get from chat. And right now the chatbot, I need to update it because right now it's a mono behavior and I want to switch it to a system. I think this is how it will work, but okay, so then we just create the entity here, buffer.create entity, and so we can pass the archetype, like we can store the archetype in this database manager. The archetype equal, oh no, that's not what we do. So user archetype. That's entity manager dot create archetype, and so we'll have user ID and then user has flags. Right. Okay, so that works fine. And then this follower list request handler, so it passes the buffer here, and then it would also just set the component to add the follower flag to this user. So that's way easier. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. I mean, there's a little bit complexity because now whenever we call this, we have to have a buffer, but then those other systems, which were kind of awkward, don't have to be called ever, so that makes me happy. We don't have to spend time trying to get them to work either. Alright, so this is a new user has flags. Okay, the only problem now is that we want to just add the flag. So, and we don't know what flags this user has already. So probably we'll still want to have some system that will add flags. But the good thing about that is that we already know the entity. Right, there's no easy way that I can like... I mean, I guess the real easy way is if I just store the flags in the database. Or... is it actually? I mean, we're not going to have to... this isn't going to be called too much. I wonder if... the thing is that the buffer doesn't... or the entity doesn't exist yet at this point. I was going to say, I wonder if I could just do something like, I don't know, entity manager get component for the user entity, and then we would just add this flag. But the problem about that is other systems might have added the user flags on it. Okay, so I think the best way is just to like increment the flags in this database, and then on the next frame, once all that's done, we'll tell the game to update the information on the entity. Which, yeah, I guess is fine. We don't really, besides that, we don't really need to store the user flags but on this value, but I think it'll just be easier this way. Flags. So now, yeah, we need to make sure that whenever we change the flags here, that we fire off some event to tell the game to update the flags. So I guess I will recreate that one class, but it'll be slightly simpler. So update user flags on entity. And user ID. Yeah, so I don't want to have to search through the whole list of user IDs. And we already have the entity, so we can go ahead and pass it. Yeah, so basically what we'll do is just on the beginning of the next frame, for any of these components, we would go through and set the data on the entity. But I guess I can't really jobify this because I have to get the flags from this, unless we just pass the flags onto this command, but then we have to search through them and like add them together. Gosh, this has been a bit more complicated than I thought. Now I'm starting to rethink, do we really need to have user entities? I still think it's useful because, like, I know when I try to pick user logos, I'm going to want to be able to sort through users based on these flags. And it would be really nice if I could do it in a job. Okay, well maybe, let's see. Maybe we'll just go back to having that update event. We'll kind of just go halfway. So we'll have an update event. I guess it will know the entity because the entity is right here. But instead of passing it, like instead of keeping track of the flags here, we'll actually just once again have add and remove commands here. And then next frame, what we'll have to do is like combine all of these flags together. Or yeah, combine all of these changes together and then add them all at once. Probably is the easiest way to do it. Okay. Let's back up here so I can get some of the code that I created. So this is flags, entity, yeah, and then the request entity equals buffer dot create entity, and then we have the flag. Oh, I didn't back up enough, so entity archetype. So then we pass it the entity, which we have from here. Okay, so this user flags updater we can keep, but we don't have to worry about creating the entities anymore, which is nice. Okay, so what this does is, again, for every event, we don't need the user IDs. We don't really need anything here. So what I actually need to do is look through the user flags on entity and what's the best way to do this? So basically, if they have the same entity, I want to combine the changes together. So I wonder... Okay, so let's just have public... I don't know if I can use a queue because I have to like look backwards. Okay, so it looks like unfortunately I can't do this in parallel. Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, I guess I could kind of do it in parallel based on each entity. Maybe the easiest way to do this is I actually loop through for each user. I mean, a lot of users aren't going to have any changes, but I don't think this user flags updater will run super often. And even if it does, I mean, we probably won't have too many changes on the same frame. So we want to have iJob for each with entity, user has flags. So what we'll do is for each entity, and then we'll have a list of all the event. So read only public native array on entity. So update flags. So this will be updates. Okay, and then if updates. Oh yeah, so we got to loop through each update. So if updates I dot entity equals entity, and you can do this because the entities are basically just an ID. I think they even like have the index. Actually, I wonder how. I'm sure Unity just compares the indexes together, so I'm gonna trust this works. If it doesn't, then I guess I can just say if entity index equals entity index. But anyway, so yeah, I need now I need a was gonna say now I need a command buffer, but no, I think I'm fine. Let's go to utilization. So flags dot flags, and then when we have this or equals, that means that it's going to combine what's already on the flags with these new flags that will be specified by the update. And then to remove a flag, then we would say equals f.flags and not updates dot remove flags. So what this means is, so the AND operator returns a number that for every bit on here, bit in is equal to 1 if each of the bits here are 1. And this operator inverts this number so that anything that is 1 is 0. So basically, if the remove flags at index in was 1, then it will change to 0 here. So the only way that the output for this entire thing would be a 1 is if the flags started as 1 and then the update was 0. So that means we didn't want to remove that flag. Anyway, I hope that made sense. I know it's kind of a crash course on binary math. I'd encourage you to look up bitwise operators and Boolean algebra if you are curious more about how that works. Kind of hard to verbally explain it without like a pictogram, but okay, so to get this we're going to need a query. And yeah, this is way simpler than trying to loop through, and thankfully we can still do it parallel. It's just going to run for every user instead of every change. But I don't think it will matter too much, at least I hope not. Okay, so this will be the event query. And event query equals get entity query, and we just need any of the update user flags components, and yeah, we will require for update. Okay. So what we'll do here is we'll get a list of it. So updates equals event query to component data array temp job, and I guess we can have this filled out at a later date. Updates queue dependencies. Why is it not like that? Oh, because I didn't give it the type. Update user flags. Okay. And then we pass that here. And since this is a for each, we need to pass the component system to it. Alright, so now I want this updates array to dispose of itself after this worker is complete, so that's why I pass the dependencies to it. And then we can return them to Unity. Okay. So I think that's good. Let's see what happens. What I'd like to do also maybe is name each of these entities. Although I guess we only would know of their actual display name once we got to this point, so maybe I'll just name it based on the game ID. But only if we're in debug, because we don't need to do it otherwise. So entity, or is it world? Set name. Oh no, so it's entity manager set name. I wonder if I can do it now when the entity was just passed from a buffer. I'm gonna hope so. So let's name this user. That's fine. Alright, so let's go ahead and test this out. So basically we hope that the flags will be updated to show that they're following. Okay, what's that error? There's no argument. Oh yeah, so the chatbot is saying that I don't pass a buffer to it. I'm just gonna pass it null, so... Oh yeah, that won't work either because the command buffer is a structure which is not nullable. But I don't really want to worry about that right now because, like I said, I need to update the chatbot code anyway. Alright. Okay. So yeah, we've got a bunch of users. Okay, so it didn't name the entities, but I guess I'm okay with that. Oh, so one problem is I see that the user flags are all none when they should be set to follow. And why is this request follower list being stuck in here? Couldn't it delete? Oh, again, I forgot to update these. Oh, I'm surprised it even... How did it run, actually? Because these queries are not correct. Oh, I guess they ran when the request stream online state was called. But yeah, this is how it should actually be. Yeah, it's kind of just blind luck that that worked so far. Let's make sure it still works. Okay, yeah, so yeah, it did get deleted, and we still got a list of all followers. But yeah, the user flag still didn't get updated, so I wonder... Okay, that makes me worry that the... This update, or this equals expression is not working. Okay, so let's remove the burst compile so I can print. So update, debug log. Oh, this is gonna really spam. Okay, so what let's see if this is ever run. If this doesn't ever run, then that means that the entity did not... I mean, it never gets this far. I guess I should also make sure that it even, like, creates the worker. Updating entity flags. And I guess let's go ahead and pass the... let's see. Add updates. Add flags and remove. Okay, and then here say debug log Scheduling flag update worker. Just to see if this ever runs. Oh, okay, well actually I think I might have just found the error. We need to wait until this component data array finishes. Well, I mean, filling out the data. Because what might happen is that it's running on empty, like uninitialized data, so basically the entity was all, well, it can't actually be null because it's a structure, but basically an uninitialized entity because it was running before this allocator had finished its job. So it could be any of those problems. I guess we'll try to narrow it down now. Let's see, it's just saying the database entry was updated. Interesting, but it doesn't ever say that the system ran for the flag updater. Should show up here somewhere. But I don't see, I see the users, but I don't see any of the events. Well, because I guess they get deleted next frame whether it runs or not. So since this is never called, I'm gonna, just so that I don't get spammed with this all the time. Yeah, so it didn't update this. I guess because the entity wasn't really created yet, because we only create, like, I guess, I don't know if you guys could hear that. Something fell out my door, or outside my door. But yeah, so this doesn't actually, I guess, return the real entity because it's not created yet. It's just like a handle for it returned by the buffer. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out. So is there? That's a shame. Making me think that this entity will be useless. What happens if I just print the debug log? So we're learning a lot about the entity system today. I've never tried most of this stuff. Okay, so the entity has negative values. That's interesting. So I guess I wonder if they're negative, that means they must be like not created, because up here you can see the entity index are obviously on the entity name. So I guess if they're negative, that means it's like I don't know the right term, but just a command for the entity command buffer to create an entity, but it's not the actual entity yet. How do I want to do this? X5. Oh, that's just from the debug log or debug window. Okay, so that makes, unfortunately, that this whole plan won't really be very useful. Because I kind of need to wait until the next frame to get the actual entity. Well, let's see how. How painful would it be? I guess it won't really be that painful now. If I just do something like user ID. I guess the problem again is that we don't know if the user... Well, no, okay, here's what we can do. If the user... We know that there's always going to be some user entity if there's an entry here in the database. So, but we can't store it here, which is a bit unfortunate. But I guess what we can do is if it's new, then we'll just tell it to create the user with the archetype. And then we'll just... Yeah, I mean, here we can set the user ID on it. So set component. User entity. So the only problem is right now if anything needs to create this, but also needs to edit something on the entity, they can't. Which I guess is kind of the whole problem, but that's fine. Set component. Gosh, there's some super loud car out my window. Alright, so new user ID, and here we can pass the user ID through. So at least this can be updated, and so... Why is it not? Oh, it's the user entity, not the entry. So we can guarantee that at least there will be a user for this component when this buffer runs. But unfortunately, we can't store the entry to it. So what we have to do now is instead of storing the entry, we'd actually just store the user ID, which I think will be okay. And then instead of flag updater checking if the entities are equal, we just check if the user IDs are equal. Don't get a reference to, so user ID. And this can be read only because we're not going to change the user ID. Okay, so I think this is still okay. It's not quite as clean as the previous system, but I think it will actually work fine. So yeah, the only problem I can see is that if we wanted to add a component to the user entity out here, because this update or create active entry doesn't pass the entity backwards, but if we really need to, we could just have this have an out variable for the entity. But which, that'd be kind of weird because if it's not a new entry, then the entity would be null, so I'm kind of hoping that I won't ever need to do that. I'm gonna probably try pretty hard to make sure I don't. But, so hopefully everything will work now. We get a couple bugs, it's okay, but let's see. We're online. Oh, it did update, it just didn't tell me. Unfortunately, the user flags are still none. Oh, okay, well that's another bug actually, because yeah, I already knew about this. For some reason, the system is never running. Or not the system, the flag updater. Because this never is called. So why is that happening? This is the begin initialization. And we set the component. I know this is called because we create... Okay, I'm gonna remove this message component, and so these will stay around forever. Let's see what happens. At least we can check if the entity is created. And if it does work after that, then I know that there's some timing problem, which could be kind of a pain to fix, but... Okay, yeah, so it's still not... Okay, so it is running now. And it's gonna run every frame. But... yeah, so now the user flags is updating. Okay, so how does that happen? So it seems like we're adding this, like we're creating the buffer, and it's supposed to be a begin initialization, but it seems like what's happening is the entity is being destroyed before this system can see it. But this is on the initialization system group, so it runs after the command buffer. I'm doing something. I feel like it's probably a stupid mistake on my part. I mean, I could just have this system destroy the entities when it's done with it, but it doesn't have a command buffer so far, so I don't really want to add that unless I need it, and I shouldn't. Because the message destroyer system. So this destroys. So it runs in the presentation system group, and it destroys them on the beginning of the next frame. Oh, you know what? It's because it's using this query, I think. Yeah, it's using a query. So we tested this, and when you, a few streams ago, if you pass a query to destroy entity, it doesn't, like, unpack the query at this point. It waits until the entity command buffer is rewound and executed. So what could happen is we create those entities with the message, and they exist before the command buffer, or before in the command buffer than this command. And so the game creates those entities, but then it gets to this delete message query command, and then it unwinds the query to find all the entities, which include the ones that were just created, and so it just destroys them all. So I think to fix that, all I have to do is just give a destroy command for each individual entity, which is kind of a pain, but if I have to. So entities equals message query dot to entity array. Could do this in a job. Do I want to bother? Does it matter? Technically it would run faster if I did. Let's just go ahead and do it. So job handle. This will be a job component system, and then job handle input dependencies, and then struct delete worker equals iJob. I guess I could do iJob for each. That way I don't have to mess with getting the data out of the query myself. then we'd have a reference to the entity command buffer. Yeah, it needs to be concurrent because this is going to be multi-threaded. Okay, so we're not actually going to write to this message, so we can just pass read only. I don't think it's... Well, it might speed it up a little bit, I'm not sure. But all we're really going to do is just say buffer destroy entity. Oh yeah, we have to pass the index. Okay, so don't need this anymore, and don't need that. So what we actually do is just steps equals delete worker, or no, we have to create a new one. Buffer equals buffer system dot create command buffer to concurrent, and schedule this input dependencies, and then we just have to tell the buffer system to run when this one is finished. Add job handle. Okay, and return dependencies. So I hope this is the error because I'm not sure why else it would run, but okay. So now I don't actually need this query except to tell the game to only run when we have our entities with the message component. Okay. So let's see if the game works correctly now. I guess I should add the message component back to the archetype here. Yeah, so that's one reason that you kind of have to be careful whenever you use queries with the entity command buffer, because yeah, it doesn't like I guess evaluate the query until the command buffer is executed. Okay, so yeah, that was the problem because now it worked. I'm surprised I didn't run into that earlier actually, but I guess I haven't been using too many events. So now the flags are updated to say follower. Okay, so cool. I didn't expect to spend the whole stream doing this, but it's alright, I guess. I just want to make sure I haven't broken anything. I guess I did break, so it still, well, it reads from this command. It doesn't actually, like the chatbot's not active, but alright. I guess it just turned 6, so let me wrap this up. I guess that's a good place to stop. So what do I want to... So I need to download logos. So that will be what we'll do tomorrow. So we figured out how to get the follower list and also add followers to the user database. And the good thing, I guess, is that now that we've done that, basically for subscribers we can do something that's almost exactly the same as this, and for chatters, just whenever they chat we would add a chatter flag, and then we'll need to have like a timeout component as well. But what else is there? I guess viewers, kind of the same thing as chatters. So I mean, yeah, we did take a while to figure this out, but that's okay. But yeah, it is time for the stream to end, so I guess I'll go ahead and call it. I'm sorry we didn't get to downloading logos. That's what I'm really excited to do because I want the game to start looking better. But yeah, we'll get to it tomorrow for sure because I guess now we have everything we need. But yeah, anyway, thanks everybody for coming by and watching and chatting. I really appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow, same time. I guess I always get this mixed up. I think it's 5 Eastern time and 3 Pacific time is when my stream starts. And let's see, tomorrow's Thursday, so yeah, we'll actually be working on a different project tomorrow. Just I'm going to try to do some more visual effects stuff, and so I found this cool effect to get kind of sprites to like wobble on screen, kind of like the original Yoshi's Island or Baba Is You. So I think that'll be kind of fun. And so that's about it. And then again, yeah, like I said last stream, I'd like to get, if anybody's interested in having like a world building or like how to prepare for like a D&D sessions type stream. I think that'd be kind of fun to make like some enemies or something, because over Christmas break I decided to run a D&D game for some family, and it's actually been really fun. I've enjoyed making up like the story and the encounters and world building in general, and I think it's pretty good for just like from a game design perspective to try and figure out how to do that stuff and make it fun. So that's been I've really been enjoying doing that, and I thought it might be fun to do on stream as kind of like a more game design focused stream, because we mostly just do programming here, but I'd like to do like game design or level design. Yeah, so that's why I was kind of... I wanted to try to finish one of these games every month. Maybe I'll be able to now that I can stream more consistently, but anyway, sorry, I'm rambling. So yeah, I'll put some links in chat if you're interested in seeing me on any social media. I do have most of them, including a YouTube channel where I post all my VODs if you'd like to catch up. And if you are watching on YouTube, I'll put that stuff in the description. And then I have a Discord, so yeah, feel free to come by and chat. I'd love to see you. And I think that's about it. So I hope to see you tomorrow, and have a great night. Bye-bye.